ally. The big axe sank its way through the large arc and then came down on the block of wood with a mighty crash. It neatly cleaved in two formidable mass, the pieces flying for a long distance in opposite directions. Surveying his feet with glowing pride, Sebio felt a rifle run down the muscles of his arms, forearms, and shoulders. He dropped the heavy axe and wiped the perspiration from his brows, from his bare brown arms, letting his fingers rest caressingly on each muscle. Small were his muscles and flat and flabby when relaxed. But how hard and powerful they become when he tensed them, as hard as season. Knocked and took triumphantly, he raised his arms above his head and facing the afternoon sun. He thrust out his chest and made every muscle of his body tense. He was quite tall, above the height of the ordinary native, but he had paid for this increased height in diminished breadth. His chest was flat, his neck is long, and his legs is thin. He was one of those boys who the village people said grew too fast. He will become bigger and stronger when he reaches his 25th year. His mother had always told solicitous friends and relatives how deceptive his figure was. Sebio thought. No wonder those who knew him called him Sebiong Pasmado or Sebio the Weakling, because of his light figure, his spindle shanks, his timidity. None of them would believe that he could lift two Socony cans full of water with either hand and raise them shoulder high, or that he could carry 3 sacks of rice on those narrow shoulders. As thought of them, he snorted scornfully. The snake is the most slender, the most timid creature of the field, and yet people are afraid of it. Sebio, what are you staring at? A querulous voice came from the nipa hut. Nothing, Nanay. I was stretching my cramped arms, came the sheepish answer. Well, it is growing late. How do you expect me to cook rice without firewood? Yes, yes, Nanay. With renewed vigor, he seized an axe and hewed away. The thick blade fairly sank as it swung back and forth over his shoulder. He paused and, for a while, was lost in thought. If he could only summon such strength, and those foolish games of strength and skill, he had always failed there miserably. Somehow his courage always ran out before a noisy, bantering crowd. What strength can there be in those puny arms, in the flat chest? He would hear people say around him, and most unbearable of all, his friends pitied him. The men said, "You have no strength." The woman, "You have no fighting heart." Thunder and lightning of Satan. He matured. Those memories angered him. Once more, he savagely attacked and would before him. Perspiration blinded his eyes. His unruly hair got into them every time he bent down. But he mended not. In a last tremendous swing, he put every ounce of energy in his arms and brought down the axe. The anger blade passed through the entire thickness of the block, through the stump prop, and sunk into the soft earth beneath. For a moment he regarded the result with a feeling of satisfaction. Then, gathering together the sheaves, he went into the house. That evening, as his mother sat in front of him at their humble table, he was strangely silent. "Are you thinking going to Tia Binay's tonight?" she asked. "Yes, Nanay." He didn't add that he had been thinking of almost nothing else all day. "When you go, take with your own winstone." One of his workers came over and told me she wanted to borrow it. Tell her also that the herbs she used for her uncle's rheumatism did me go too. And thanks for her, for me, Sebio. The way Tias Binay. lead through recently harvested rice fields. A few weeks before, the grain and lane mellow and golden in all enveloping light of the full moon, now only short, thick stubble, wisp of straws, and traces of delicate, elusive fragrance of the ripe palay remains to remind one of the hectares of slender, heavy laden stalks of grain that he had once rippled in graceful undulations with each breath of the harvest wind. There was scarcely any beaten path across these fields, but with hardly a glance about him, Sebio made his way through them, avoiding each stalk of sharp stubble, or the holes where the carabao's feet had sunk heavily during the rainy season, and which had caked since then in the hot sun. The lovely night was full of sounds and odors of life. The slender swaying bamboos whispered on each other eternal secrets of the night. And from the distance came dying croak of a frog caught in the jaws of a snake. When he reaches the Abinai's place, he saw that the evening work had already begun. All about the moonlit clearing that stood at distance from the house were grouped young men and women whose gay laughter and voices carried far into the distance. In the center was a square of a concrete where the golden grains of palay had been laid to dry. On one side were 5 wooden mortars, around each of which 3 persons, 2 men and a girl, stood pounding grain. Each individual brought down his pestle and definite rhythm and succession. One first, and then, just he has lifted his pistol, the next would bring his down, and so on. Every now and then, the gifted voice of someone in the group would break into song, and then notes of a hunting kundiman will be wafted into the breeze to add sweetness to the silence of the countryside. At intervals, however, a sleepy cock perched aloft in a tree nearby would let out on a obstreperous crouse if he disapproved of so much gaiety and lightness of the spirit. Sometimes, to vary the monotony, when men pounding palay would show off tricks with the pistol. One of the group could make the heavy tool stand on the tip of the little finger or on the nose, toss in the air, whisk it between the fingers of one hand, and bring it down on the palay without upsetting the regular rhythm of his companions. Pounding, such demonstration of approval from the onlookers and repeated applause will encourage more difficult stunts. Around the enclosure was a sort of bench built by tying together several strips of bamboo. Here many sat, and while waiting their turn at the mortar and pestle, laughed and joked and ate unsparingly of the suman and bingka of Tia Binay's. "Whew, there's Sebio. Good evening to all of you. Good evening, Tia Binay." Tia Binay prepared at him. She was getting old, with her failing eyes, unable to see through even in the daytime, was finding it difficult to recognize her guest at once. "Who is this?" she asked kindly. "It is Sebio, Tia Binay." "Sebio?" She could not place the name. "Sebiong Pasmado," roared someone from a group close to him. "Ah, yes, now I know." There was a hilarious outburst from the group in blazing eyes. Sebio turned the cruel joker, but he saw only what seemed to him a surging sea of sneering faces. His face smarted as if from a slap. He turned again to Tia Binay. Nanay told me to give this to you and to thank you for those herbs. The old woman gave a grunt of satisfaction. Of course, they will do her good. Why, my grandmother used them before I did, and so did her great-grand-uncle before her. He found a seat in the farthest and darkest corner. After a while, so lost was in his thought that he did not see a package done up in banana leaf, which a small white hand held out to him. Not until a voice spoke. "Her, Sebio, never mind those people. They are elders. Try this woman. I made it myself." Not until she spoke the recognized Mercy. Dumbly, he took the package, tore open the wrapper, and tasted the contents. Slowly he became his old self again. "Mercy, you must have labored this with your kisses," he boldly ventured. The gratified girl blushed to the roots of her hair. "Give me back the suman," she demanded. Sebio laughed. He was again his like-able self. He tried to catch outstretched hand, but like lightning, it was withdrawn, and when he took up the girl was gone. He sat down again. Oh, for a throne and a crown and a universe to lay at the foot of Mercy. Now he had fully recovered his composure, and he could study the crowd better. There was Ambo and others. How strangely both beautiful and moonlight made everything. He saw the play of moonbeams on the matchless hair of Carmelang and wondered if its fragrance was more soul-satisfying than the champaka scented breeze that ever and anon cares and shakes of lauders. And then he remembered the starlight that he saw in the dark eyes of Mercy, and he wondered no more. He became aware that the workers are being changed. The second shift was ready. He got up. "Here, Melio and Kiko work her. Anita, go to the mortar with Tonyo. You, Sebio, come here, and you too, Pasio." Tia Binais was assigning each to his place. Sebio found himself with Pasio, and wondered of wonders. Mercy was with them to complete the group of there. For a moment he could hardly contain his joy, and then remembered that he was also with Pasio. The bully, the braggart. Boog, boog, boog. Every vessels filled with a dull thought each time. First he, then Mercy, then Pasio in strict rhythm. Pasio, as sure as death, would soon show of his powers before of world, before Mercy. Sebio would have to compete with him, which he knew would be another trial before of mocking, unsympathetic crowd, another effort doomed to failure. Mercy, conscious of the strain under which Sebio had begun to labor, endeavored to reveal it. "This morning, we chased a big snake across the yard, but it escaped. They say that nothing can prevent death from the bite of some snakes. If you are bitten on the arm, you may have to cut it off, or burn it," volunteered Pasio sneeringly. "Here, Sebio," suddenly said Pasio, in a tone that carried to everybody, "try this one." He tossed up the heavily pestle, causing it to describe the figure 8 in mid-air. Caught it and brought it down, just as Mercy had left hers up. It was well timed. Wonderful, everyone said. Sebio felt himself growing hot all over. Pablo had challenged him. Everybody had heard the challenge. Although his eyes were intent on his work, he could feel everybody looking at him. See how industriously Sebu works. He does not even see us. Tia Binay, you really ought to consider him for a son-in-law. The taunt was flung by a heartless rival. What a noise they made! He dared not raise his eyes, lest they see the light in them or he sees Mercy's own. Nanay does not need any son-in-law. I am still strong enough to do work at home, came the surprising retort from Mercy. At this day, all laugh and test her about her proud mouth, her delicate hand, and her study to sex. To her country, Topacio, and joke was too good to cut short. Tia Binay, he asked with a confident smile, what must your son-in-law be like? But Tia Binay refrained from answering after a long look of her daughter, so somebody answered for her. He must have rice field. No, first of all, he must be industrious, another put in. Above all, he must be handsome. You are all so wrong, cried and exasperated Mercy. My mother's son-in-law must first be my husband. That seemed to silence them for a while. Well, well, your husband then, he must be kind and abundant and loving, and fleet of foot and strong of arm. Her then, you beautiful men, can anybody do this? It was Milio, the village clown. He seemed to be holding a short rod that looked like iron. He was trying to bend it, and his apparent efforts to do so. His whole body was controlled in the most ludicrous way. Suddenly it cracked into splinters, and by the sound they knew that it was only a cleverly painted pieces of bamboo. While they were still holding their sides and slapping their things, Pasho stood up. He streamed up on one of the mortars and took it a horseshoe that was nailed her for good luck. Her Melio, in an imitation of your feet, he said, attempting to inject a modest note in his tone. His size, pitch, and heart. In that light, no one could see Pasho very well, and they felt rather than saw the bulging lines of his muscles as he strained them convulsively. What they actually saw was the curved pieces of iron being slowly straightened out of by Pasho's hand. A murmur of admiration rose from the crowd. Bravo, unheard of, incomparable. Try that, Melio, but don't crack it. And Pasho laughingly tossed the pieces of iron to him. No thanks. Suppose I vomit blood, and Melio tossed it to Sebio. For a moment, the young man did not know what to do. Somehow he felt that his chance that he could bend back that bit into the likeness of horseshoe. Easily, suddenly, he got up with a bound and seized it. Shouts of derision immediately followed. Even those few who wished him well started at him with doubt of their faces. Try that, Melio. About what is going to do? Hey, Sebio, drop that. That's iron, not bamboo. He could feel the heat mounting to his cheeks at his grip. The two ends strained. His lips clamped together. His face went pale. His eyes bulged. He held his breath during the effort. An eternity, it seemed, passed. He threw his felt. The iron gave way, and he opened his eyes. He saw that it had bent only a little. Whew, My strong man. What now? I told you it was not bamboo. Sebio would be a strong man and do mighty deeds if only he would eat more. And yet Sebio knew for a certainty that he could have done it. He cursed himself as like a whipped dog. He thought for a place to hide the horseshoe. No strength, said the man, no fighting heart, whispered the woman. Shamefaced, Sebio retired to a corner. He wanted to live to be alone with an axe and some logs. With each, he could give vent to all the bitterness that was in him. But to live now, he realized, would be an admission of his desperation, his hopelessness. Sebio whispered Mercy, who noticed had approached him when his tormentors had left him alone. I want to make a fire so we can roast some corn. Will you help me get some hay? Like a drowning man who suddenly found a floating object to cling to, he eagerly followed Mercy to the hay pile. Here was someone who understood him. How could I do anything with a crowd? He murmured a little apologetically, then he disgust at himself rising. He kicked the pile of hay. This is his feeling somewhat. Yes, I know. She sympathized as she pulled out an armful. Just let me try again. And again, he struck savagely at the hay pile. They dropped their burden and center of the clearing, and then, as he turned away, a blood-curdling scream from Mercy burst, the noise being made by the mercy makers. He turned around to see what had frightened the girl. From the merry makers, he turned around to see what had frightened the girls from the bundle that Mercy dropped, and emerged, rearing its head like some fantastic toy, its slender, green body poised to strike, a snake. And Mercy stood and stared like one hypnotized. Sebio knew that it would strike before his next breath. There was no time to plan what to do, to well what part of body to move. Instinctively, however, he made the move to place himself between the girl and the danger. As he did this, he struck as the bundle of hay on which the snake lay poised to strike. The effort was so ill executed, however, the miss it entirely. He fell on his face, and before he could recover, the serpent had bitten him on the calf of the leg, and then was gone. Sebios staggered up and looked at his leg. From twin spot of the skin, blood was beginning to ooze. A momentary sense of faintness came over him, and he closed his eyes. Already he seemed to feel the searing course of the deadly poison to his sting, to his heart. He felt an impulse to run, to dance about, to do anything. The faces around him were becoming hazy. Only the excited voices of those crowding around him prevented his mind from becoming completely numbed. The deadly dahong palay. Get some vinegar. Sebio is dying. Wail someone. His thought weirdly, crazily, his breath became convulsive. Over and over he rolled in dust, clothing widely at the air, at the earth around him, as if he sought for something solid, some divine support that would bolster up his nerve. He came up violently against one of the mortars and Sebio is dying widely some. His thought weirdly crazy, his breath became convulsive. Over and over he rolled in the dust, clawing wildly at the air, at the earth around him as he sought for something solid with divine support that would bolster up his nerve. He came up violently against one of the mortars, and something heavy felt in the dust almost on his face. He seized it. It was a horseshoe. It was as if out of a dark hole a stalwart and hand lifted him. So clear, so sharply did he see light. He waved the bubbling group away. A fire here, quickly, he muttered in a agonizing voice. It was mercy, a boying uncomprehendingly who scooped a handful of any and husk, and in no time at all had blazing fire. It was she was tore a piece of her skirt and bound up his leg tightly above the wound. It was her delicate hand, now suddenly grown powerful, that had tightened the ligature above the wound on the leg of the dying man. The other were paralyzed to inaction. A knife for the love of Christ, Sebio against matured convulsively. Several sped to get a knife, and several moments, eternities, passed. He could feel his foot becoming cramped and cold. Then a large knife was handed to him. And now the crowd witnessed the act that they were to relate to their children in after years. When a low cry Sebius says the horseshoe and before the same faces that had frequently taunted him, he straightened in as if it were as a slender hairpin. When he wrapped a pieces of cloth around one end and thrust the other end into the fire, where was no applause from the onlookers, just heavy, labored breathing. They could only stare and stare, now at the colorless face of Sebio, grim and twisted as if by some terrible resolution, now at the pieces of iron turning an angry luminous red. What is he going to do? Merciful God! For Sebio had taken the sharp knife and had slashed across the two pin pricks. Dark blood oozed out slowly. Then he grasped the red-hot iron and before their horrified gaze plunged it into the wound. The glowing point sizzled, drawing the blood out of the wound. The smell of burning flesh filled the air. The woman shrieked, several of them who could no longer stand. The sight fainted. The calmly Sebio laid aside the iron, and his frothy lips relaxed into semblance of a smile. Slowly his eyes closed. Somebody held him up, but before unconsciousness came he had seen their eyes, and they told him that never again would be called Sebyong Pasmado.